criminals who snubbed their sentencing hearings could soon face up to 2 extra years behind bars, and that's under a new bill heading to Parliament this Wednesday. But Labour's so-called tough crackdown has already been ridiculed, with critics calling it all bark and no bite. Well, why is that? Well, the answer is simple. Because some of the headline punishments last just weeks. Judges will be able to hand down solitary confinement, but only for a maximum of 3 weeks. Other so-called penalties, like taking away TVs or gym time, can be imposed, but only for a mere 6 weeks. Now, ministers insist that this will send out a message, but with hardened criminals already facing decades inside, many are asking, and perhaps rightly so, who's really going to be scared off by losing a few gym sessions? Well, joining now to discuss this is Julie Taylor, an inspiring woman and campaigner whose grandson, Liam Taylor, was killed in a brutal attack outside a pub in Writtle in Essex in 2020. And since then, she's been campaigning for victims and to get knives off of our streets. Well, welcome to the show, Julie. It's always a delight to speak to you. You're a truly incredible woman. Before we talk about today's new ruling, would you please mind once again sharing the tragic story of your grandson, Liam, and what happened to him?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. We lost my 19-year-old grandson in January 2020. He was at a village pub. He had done nothing wrong. He was attacked by some individuals and lost his life at the scene. In a 39-second attack, he had 6 stab wounds and 28 separate injuries. We have 3 perpetrators serving what the government call a life sentence in prison, but it's just a prison sentence. Every year, as I said, we're now 5.5 years, every year gets harder, and every year I learn a little bit more about, the law and things like that, and it's actually laughable. It's a joke. It's ridiculous. The law is constantly on the perpetrator's side. The victims can't speak. Our loved ones are dead. They can't speak, so it's our duty to speak for the dead. And we've got to stick up for them because these people have been put in prison for doing the most horrendous crimes, and there is no justice. No matter how long they get, there is no justice. But we can't keep having insult after insult added on top of everything else that we're going through as families.
And Julie, your incredible work has taken you inside prisons. You've met with killers, with knife killers specifically, and you've told the story, the heartbreaking story, and some of the details about how you held Liam's hand when after he'd passed away in the chapel, and you spoke to him. How did this happen? And you tell those stories inside prisons now to killers to try and reach them, and it works. Your work is astonishing.
Yeah, we've had weapons handed in. My colleague and I have done workshops, and we've had weapons handed in when we've left, which is so worthwhile us going. I volunteer. I do everything on a voluntary basis. I'm not a charity or anything like that. But those things make it worthwhile. And I have met people that are very remorseful and they know what they have done is wrong, but they have still done these things. And the mindset of me is to keep talking to these people to change their mindset. But as I say, they admit they've done the most horrendous crimes and they must be punished for it.
And Judy, the legislation up for discussion today is this Victims and Courts Bill. It's published today. And this is in the wake of the fact that several high-profile murders have refused to face the music. They've refused to go into the dock. From a victim's perspective, from a survivor's perspective, how important is it for families to have that moment in court, to see the killers, to try and reach some kind of resolution, some kind of peace moving forward?
Of course, it's very important, and it is an absolute insult. It should never be allowed. We mollycoddle too much in this country. If it's another country, this wouldn't be allowed. They would be dragged up the stairs in handcuffs and to face, the families and things like that. You don't always get the remorse that you want. We definitely didn't. One of our perpetrators actually turned to his mother and went, "It's all right, it's easy." Now, that was like a kick in the teeth. You have to sit there and you can't say anything. You've just got to sit and take it. But that shows what sort of person that you're dealing with, So it isn't right, and they should be remorseful. They know what they've done wrong. Some of it's bravado. I'm not going to say sorry. I'm just going to be the big I am. some people are honestly, sorry, but it's got to stop. They've got to face reality of what they've done. They have got to be punished for what they've done, and the punishment should fit the crime. We can't unbury our loved ones and bring them back to speak. They've gone. So we've got to get this right. This has gone on far too long. Like I said, I'm 5.5 years in. It's absolutely no time at all. But the things that I see and the stabbings that are daily, it's not getting any better. It's terrible out there.
So, Judy, 2 points. First of all, you mentioned there about they must be almost forced to face the music. Lucy Letby, the crossbow killer, Axel Rudakabana, kicking off in court, denying the families their moment to face their perpetrator, to read out the impact statement, the impact it's had on them. First of all, do you think they should be forced to get into that dock by any means necessary?
Yes, I do. I do think they should be dragged up there. Put a pair of handcuffs up and pull them up the stairs, because they have to at least acknowledge what they've done, whether they like it or not. They don't want to face the victims' families. Of course they don't, but they should have thought about that before they did these horrendous, hideous crimes.
And Judy, you've looked into the eyes of the abyss, literally. You've met with killers, the precise kind of, I don't know what word to use, the kind of people that took your beautiful grandson's life. Do you think it will have any impact whatsoever to say, oh, by the way, if you don't go in court, you might lose a few weeks' gym time?
No, they'll laugh. They'll find it hilarious. I'm laughing at it. It is a joke. If you've got 20 years in there, you're not going to worry about 6 weeks, no telly or no gym, or 3 weeks or what. It's, if you've got murder on there, then perhaps we need to start saying, right, life for life, 20 years plus, let's put these extra sentences on and make them think, oh, actually, I don't want to have that sentence. I'm not going to do this now. There's not any deterrent. It's not enough.
And Judy, if people are facing long prison terms, 20 years plus, perhaps a full life term, what difference would it make if they're threatened with an extra couple of years on top for not facing the music?
None at all. Absolutely none at all. None at all. They'll laugh. This will not affect anybody. I don't think that anybody will be worried about this. It's just a waste of time.
Judy, do you think there's a huge disconnect between the lawmakers and the law breakers? The law breakers don't seem to give a monkeys about these kind of token gestures.
No, they don't. There's a mindset out there, and a few people that, I do what I want, and if I get caught, I get caught. That seems to be the minority's mindset, and it's really sad. And that's why we've got to sort of educate these children as young as we can, 7, 8 years old, to talk to them in schools, just constantly talk to them, warn them of the dangers, warn them of, it's not just somebody's life you take, it's your life that's messed up, it's your family's, and, make them realise that it has to stop. Because like I said, 5.5 years later, and it's got worse, it hasn't got any better. I would love to sit here and say, well, the last year has got better and better, but it hasn't.
Well, Judy Taylor, you're a woman on a mission. Every time I speak with you, I get very, very close to tears. How are you doing?
Liam would be 25 next week, so it's the 6th birthday we've lost. So it's not a good time at the moment, but I'm keeping very busy and doing as much as I possibly can. Just trying to stop this happening to anyone else. Like I said, it doesn't get easier, it gets harder.
Well, Judy Taylor, as ever, I'm very sorry for your loss. Those are empty words, but I truly mean it. And I think millions of our viewers are right on your side. Thank you for the work you do, and please keep fighting on. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin.
Judy
Take care.
Taylor. Thanks, darling.
Now, criminals who refuse to attend their sentencing hearings, so don't turn up, could face up to 2 extra years in prison and lose privileges under new reforms being introduced to Parliament today.
Well, the bill follows public outrage after several high-profile offenders, including Thomas Cashman, the gunman who killed 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell, refused to face victims' families in court.
Yes, we've seen this a number of times, haven't we? Well, joining us now is bereaved parent and also knife crime campaigner Gaynor Bell. Gaynor, thank you very much indeed. I've just been reminding myself about your story. Your son was murdered back in 2000, wasn't he? And you say that the perpetrator of that crime didn't bother turning up to court on several occasions. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah. It was actually parole hearings. He didn't turn up. He was in the next room, but he wouldn't come out.
And how did that make you and others feel?
Absolutely furious. I never found out why he did it. And, you know, he was trying to get out before his sentence was up many, many times. So I lost count of how many parole hearings I had to go to. But he could read exactly what I was going to say. He could comment. He could have parts taken out if he wanted. He had solicitors. He had rights. I had nothing. I had a statement to read out, which I would have loved to have faced him. I would have loved to. He was so cowardly that what he did, he cowardly stuck a knife in my son's head and in his back. He wasn't in a nightclub. He wasn't into any crime. He was sitting in an office. Why he did it, I don't know to this day. But I would have loved to have faced him and looked at him in the eye. Now, while he was in prison, they have so many privileges. Going off the subject, but while he was out on leave, I think he fathered 3 or 4 children. You know,
wow.
All this is infuriating, and all you want to do is look in that person's eyes and say, why?
People are starting to think, Kevin, that the law protects criminals, and there's no greater show of that than killers getting away, dodging the moment, not facing the music, not giving families that finality, that closure of looking them in the eye and making them face the music. Does this new ruling today, giving them extra years in prison, make any difference?
Perhaps, but really in most cases, no. I mean, Lucy Letby got a whole life sentence. Wayne Couzens, you know, the disgusting ex-policeman, got a whole life sentence. So giving them extra years is not going to affect it. However, if the sanction includes a very much reduced standard of living in prison, that may catch the attention of some. But the problem with this, most of these people who are convicted of these type of sentences, they won't think that far. So I laud the idea. I think it should be brought in. I don't think 2 years is enough. So, for example, if someone's looking at 15, 20 years for, shall we say, a horrendous rape or grievous bodily harm or attempted murder, 2 years with remission and so on won't amount to very much. Unless, of course, it's made consecutive. So, in some ways, this is just a political sop for what is a very laudable desire by the family and, in fact, by all of us. We'd love to see this. But if the sanction's going to count, it needs to be a lot stronger and affect the minds of some people who are really psychopaths. And that's going to need more than 2 years.
And Kevin, the fact of the matter is, you know, those who have lost a loved one, lost a family member in the most, you know, grievous and horrendous circumstances, they're more concerned about their rightful moment of justice, of closure. And that means getting these people into the dock by hook or by crook. What say you to the notion of dragging them, if necessary, strapped to a chair, kicking and screaming, and make them listen to the victim statements?
Well, I wouldn't be averse to that, but I think the practicalities of it would need some managing. But as you rightly say, if they are strapped into a chair with, quite frankly, a gag on them, and they're completely strapped in, then they've got to sit there for it. But there are some people who can be extremely difficult and disruptive. And even at the Old Bailey, I've dealt with people when they got out of control in the dock and tried to jump over the dock on very serious cases. And to the horror of the people who were unfortunate rape victims, they were all screaming at that moment as opposed to getting their moment, if you like, of justice. So, yes, I think anything that supports the right of people to get some form of closure, but the devil is always in the detail. And actually fighting someone to get them into a chair, to strap them in, to gag them and so on, is a challenge in itself. But, you know, if we're prepared to say, yeah, taser them, spray CS in their face and do it, yeah, good. I mean, quite frankly, I wouldn't mind doing it in my younger days as a bit of a part-time job because I'd enjoy it. But, you know, that's more about me than them. But the bottom line on it is it would be difficult physically with some people to gain that level of compliance, and you'd need to be quite well organised with some quite high-quality people to do the wrestling and fighting for you. But in principle, I support all the ideas because it's actually about closure for the family and not for the suspect. And far too often, in virtually every aspect of our criminal justice system, we are seeing that people don't get what we all think they should do. It's not the judge's fault, actually.
Okay.
It's the sentencing guidelines. It's the lack of prisons. It's the lack of court time. It's the motivated Crown Prosecution Service, the motivated police. The whole criminal justice sector needs an investment of money and new energy to rebuild their morale.
Okay.
And yeah, I agree with you. This is a good idea, but the devil will always be in the detail.
You've dealt with many, many cases in your career. You know, and you spoke to me so eloquently in the past about how victims' families need the moment more than anything to see justice being done. Do you think today's laws, just giving them extra sentences, go far enough?
I don't, Martin. I don't think it goes far enough. And my concern about dragging them in there is then the riotous behaviour they'll cause. What I would do, and I would insist that they listen to the victim impact statement. If you remember the murder of the Hunt family by Carl Clifford, and John Hunt, the father and husband of the victims, he gave such an eloquent victim impact statement. What I would suggest is there is a booth where in the prison they are put in there with speakers and they're handcuffed to the chair and they're simply forced to listen to it, because you can close your eyes, but you can't close your ears. And I just think the victims of these wicked crimes deserve to be heard, and they need to know that the criminal who committed such vile acts has been forced to listen to them. And I think that would be the easiest way and the cheapest way, and it wouldn't involve dragging them up there, but they would have to listen.
But Mike, is that far enough? I mean, I've spoken with so many people who've lost a loved one and they want their moment in court. They want to look this scumbag in the eye. They want eye-to-eye contact so they can get on with their lives. Why should they be allowed to do it from the comfort of a cell, strapped to a chair? No doubt lawyers might not even agree with you on that, but surely they should be dragged into court.
Martin, it need be, Martin, that booth could be in the court. Now, you know as well as I do, in times past, prison officers would have been like me, ex-soldiers, and they would have given the person the option. The judge has ordered you to go up. You either go up those stairs or we carry you up the stairs. Now, the carry up the stairs would have involved bumping into things all the way up, and people would have done that. The trouble is these days, of course, the prison officers wouldn't be much like me, and they would probably say something like, oh, no, it's health and safety, we can't get them up there. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to provide a practical example where the family can see that person. They can actually have a video camera on them. They can see that they're being forced to listen. And this would be a way where they wouldn't be disrupting the court proceedings, shouting and screaming. They'd be in a soundproof box. They would be forced to listen, and the family could see them being forced to listen, whether they were in the courtroom or sat remotely wherever. This would be a simple way and a very cheap and effective way to achieve that.
Because, Mike Neville, the thing about the situation we have now is that anybody knows if they commit a crime, all they've got to do is say they're having a panic attack or just simply shout and scream. We saw it with Axel Rudiker-Barner, to the point where they cannot be managed in a court and they know they can dodge the moment. So we have to have a solution where that's not feasible, otherwise they'll all be at it.
I agree. And the problem with this is some of the people who do this, like, Lucy Letby, Thomas Cashman, they're sentenced to very long periods, like life imprisonment. So 2 years extra means absolutely nothing. If you think of Carl Clifford, again, 2 years more, the man's been sentenced to 50 or more years. So what we need is a workable solution where the family can look at them. They can see that they're forced to listen. In the courtroom, they can put their hands over their ears and all this. In my solution, the speakers would be blaring inside that booth. They would be handcuffed. And as I've said to you, you can't close your ears. You would be forced to listen to the words of the people who suffered because of the wickedness of their actions.